Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm John Dodson, the director of the Global Taiwan Institute. Here at GTI, we are a 501c3 research organization focused on programs and publications intended to better illuminate the public policy discussions on issues related to Taiwan and to U.S.-Taiwan relations. We pursue this mission through a range of programs that we do, including our publication, the Global Taiwan Brief. It goes up on our website every 2 weeks with short articles about current Taiwan and the U.S.-Taiwan related issues and national security, trade, and so forth. We also publish longer research reports that we term occasional reports, where we get to go into a bit more detail on a particular issue. I'll give a shameless plug for our latest one that was released this week, written by our research fellow, Ben Sando, who used public records to do research on temples and the links between organized crime and temples in Taiwan, and their links to the United Front Mission, which I highly recommend for those of you who have a chance to take a look at. But we also do public events such as this one. Where we have public policy seminars. We've had a few this month on the sort of overall theme of social resilience in Taiwan. For example, our most recent one that looked at energy policy and Taiwan's energy resilience. But we also try to do occasional book events. We haven't done any so far this year. This will actually be our first, so we're particularly honored to have with us today Dr. Willy Wo-Lap Lam, who for decades has been a recognized expert on elite politics at the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party. I myself, in past years, and some previous work I had before coming here to GTI, where I was doing some analysis on Chinese politics, I leaned very heavily on the work of Dr. Lam. And for some of the papers and reports I wrote back in those days, if you look through the footnotes, you're gonna see the name Lam over and over again a great deal. He's written many books over the years, to include Chinese politics in the era of Xi Jinping and the fight for China's future. His most recent book, which we'll be talking about today, is this one, From Confucius to Xi Jinping: The DNA of Chinese politics, which, as I was looking through it, I think is maybe a little bit of a departure, maybe from some of the things you've done in the past. I think in the past, Dr. Lam has done really detailed sort of deep dives into elite politics and the relationships among powerful political figures in China and so forth. I think with this one, you kind of take a step back and take a longer historical of the developments of politics in China, really over the course of centuries. And I think laying out some interesting arguments to how politics in modern day China are sort of still being shaped by the legacy of political philosophies from hundreds of years ago, far back in China's imperial history. But we're very, very honored to have Dr. Lam visiting us today, who's traveled down from Canada. I will give one final shameless plug. We'll also be very fortunate to have Dr. Lam speaking at our annual conference tomorrow. Tomorrow, October 1st, GTI will be holding its 2025 annual symposium here in Washington, D.C., with full information about that and the agenda for that up on our website. So if you have a chance, please check that out as well, either live or it will be live streamed as well for those who wish to view it remotely. But I think with no further ado, rather than take up everyone's time with that, I think we'll turn to the person you really came to listen to today. And once again, Dr. Lam, we're very glad and very fortunate you could join us today. And I'll just offer you a little bit of time, I guess, to discuss your new book and the thoughts you had behind it. And then from there, we'll proceed to a bit of discussion, and perhaps we'll try to work in a little bit of Q&A as well, if folks in the audience are interested. But I think with no further ado, Willy, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Sure. So thank you very much, John. It's a rare honor and privilege to have been invited to CTI again. So it's very grateful for the invitation because I normally come to DC at least once a year, and this time the main focus of my attention is to attend CTI's 425 International Forum. And I'm doubly grateful to John for hosting this additional symposium. Even though I will rally current developments with the book. As John said, this book is a bit of a departure from what doing the past 20 years, because I have written books on major figures, beginning with Shang Yang, Lao Zi, Zhuang Zi, Xi Jinping. I have already written 2 books on Xi Jinping, and well, just on the record basis, I'm finishing a 3rd book, Xi Jinping, which is part of the highlight of the trilogy on Xi Jinping. The first book came out in 2015. As we anticipate Xi Jinping's rise to power. The second book was actually published not that long ago. It was also published in 2023. And that was about Xi Jinping at the height of the acme of his power, right after the 20th Party Congress in 2022, when he was widely recognized as what the Chinese call the eternal core of the party, the eternal core of the party leadership, or in layman's language, the apple of the life. However, lo and behold, he enjoyed that position only for, I think, just 1 year, because things began to break apart. In the middle of 2023, we saw the series of hard to explain sackings of 2030 full generals and full admirals, which some people have compared to Stalin's massive pillage of the military in the year 1937, 38, and so on. And then, so my last book on Xi Jinping will be something like well, the tentative title is Weakened Xi Jinping Struggles to Revive Reforms. Okay, Weakened Xi Jinping Struggles to Revive Reform. However, enough of my advertising. Let's come back to reality. I think in the course of our conversation, we have many occasions to touch on the book itself, which just came out 6 months ago. So it's a brand new book. It's published by Routledge Publishers in London and New York. So it's looked at how the so-called Chinese DNA from Qin, the first emperor, who lived in the 2nd century BCE, how ethos and mechanisms, ruling mechanisms of Qin have endured to this day, and endured to this day. And I have to say that recent scholarship by, for example, one of my good friends, Professor Wu Huang, Hoover Institution, Stanford, and also another good friend there, Mr. Xi Jinping, also at Hoover Institution, Stanford. They have also written books along the same line. Institutional or political DNA of Chinese institutions and Chinese historical. So their conclusion are not dissimilar to mine. Okay, are not dissimilar to mine. But first of all, as part of my opening speech, I would just like to begin with something more current, and that is the status of Xi Jinping, because most of the world's most influential media, including BBC, New York Times, Guardian, CNN, and so forth, has speculated that Xi Jinping is having tremendous problem, and it is dubious whether it would last beyond fourth Qing recession in December 1980, which they just announced yesterday will be held in October here to China. So, well, one thing about Xi Jinping is that he models himself upon two major historical figures. One was Mao Zedong, okay, Mao Zedong. This is despite the fact that his father, whom he venerates, Xi Jinping, was one of the earliest victims of Mao Zedong. Just as we know, the Cultural Revolution started in 1966 and lasted until 76. And during the Cultural Revolution, Mao Zedong took advantage of the breakdown of law and order to persecute his political enemies, who were led by the first state president of China, Qi. So Qi died in very ignominious circumstances in September of 1966. But the father of Xi Jinping, Xi Jinping, who was one of the rare liberal leaders of China, he went to jail 4 years before the Cultural Revolution started. So you can see, well, not only is there no love lost between Xi Jinping and Mao Zedong, but there were major ideological governance differences between Xi Jinping and Mao Zedong. However, despite the fact that Xi Jinping is a very dutiful son, venerates his father, he actually ended up as a very faithful disciple of Mao Zedong. Ended up as a very faithful disciple of Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong confessed that he followed Qin, the first emperors of China's edicts, throughout his life. Okay, throughout his life. So it's a very interesting development, and even to this day, one of the reasons why Xi Jinping told his comrades, told other stakeholders within the Chinese elite, is that he is breaking with tradition, because when Deng Xiaoping was alive, he laid down specific instructions that the number one of the party and the army only serve 3 terms of parties. They must serve only 10 years. But Xi Jinping cited the reason that he has to rule for at least 20 years, because he is the only person qualified to liberate Taiwan, okay, to liberate Taiwan, which is something which even Mao Zedong, the great Mao Zedong, failed to do. Okay, we shall discuss this if you're interested in the Q&A period. But in any case, despite the fact that Xi Jinping has lost power, he is still the irreplaceable number one, even though some commentators called him the nominal number one. Okay? But I believe, without a doubt, that he will serve at least until the end of his third 5-year term. That means the end of 2007, okay, the end of 2007, because in the Chinese context, in China, there are no elections, but there are Chinese style elections, okay? Chinese style elections whereby every 5 years, the, um, the Congress, Communist Party actually handpicked members of the Congress to attend this national, 5-yearly national Congress, okay? So, whoever is elected General Secretary by this Congress of Deputies held once every 5 years, gets a 5-year term. Okay, so the last Congress, as I mentioned, was in 2022, and that was the height of Xi Jinping's powers. Okay, so he will, without question, despite speculation and we have actually real facts and figures on the fact that he has lost control of the PLA, other major institutions of power. Definitely, he will serve until the end of 2027. That means the end of his third 5-year term. And I would say there is at least a 50% possibility that he will get what he wants. That is a 4 5-year term from 2027 to 2032. Okay. By the year 2032, he will be 79. Okay? He will be 79. And well, like his good friends, Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, he had invited to Beijing to attend the September 3rd major military parade. I'll discuss more of that. Putin has already served more than 10 years. Okay, so Xi Jinping is very anxious to emulate and do even better than Putin. Okay, so he will serve at least 20 years when he will be still just 79. Okay, well, if you look at world figures by comparison, Joe Biden was more than 80 when he left the White House, and our MAGA president, Donald Trump, is already 80. Xi Jinping is 1 year younger than myself, okay? So that's why I have the guts to call him Xiao Xi, okay? Little Xi, okay? Xiao Xi, because I'm 1 year older than him, okay? So, but in the Chinese context, you don't worry about the health of the top leaders because they are attended by a dedicated team of at least 12 to 13 doctors trained in the US, trained in Western medicine, but also Chinese herbalists, Chinese Qigong masters, and so forth. I think before the September 3rd military parade, his favorite Qigong master had passed master's full energy to him, okay, just through putting his hand on his back, okay. And I think before every public appearance, Xi Jinping, just like Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao before, took at least 7 or 8 different types of medications. Except that at the most recent military parade on September 3rd, okay, just a few weeks ago, Xi Jinping looks, at least to me and to many other commentators, he didn't look very healthy, okay? And he deliberately cut short his speech because there were 3 military parades during Xi Jinping's 13-year reign. The latest one was in 2015, and his speech then was about 1,670 words. But this time, he has cut his speech to just 900 words. Just 900 words. And you would have seen, if you have paid attention to the CCTV coverage, which was heavily edited, you don't see Xi Jinping raising his hand to receive the salutes from the elite representatives of different PLA factions. Okay, he didn't even raise his right hand to receive the salutes. This was partly because in 2015, when he was a lot more energetic, he raised his left hand to receive the salutes, which was the wrong protocol. Okay, you should raise your right hand. So this time, he didn't even raise either hands. Okay, and he only met face to face with the elite soldiers just for, I think, less than 5 minutes. He was riding in a PLA jeep, but they had cut short the eye-to-eye interaction between Xi Jinping and the soldiers. So you may ask, how do I relate the theme of my book, the DNA of Chinese politics, to what's happening today? Well, first of all, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, despite the fact that he unified all of China, okay? He unified all of China when he was about 30 years old. But his reign was very brief. His reign was very brief, just about 20 years. In the year 200 years before Christ, okay, 200 years. But Qin Shi Huang was a master builder, okay, was a master builder. He focused all the wealth and the energy of the nation on building major projects, okay, on building major projects. So for the political economists, you could say that Qin Shi Huang actually was the initiator of what we call Soviet-style industrial policy. Okay, so you might remember that it was the Soviet Union, not the US, which put the Sputnik out on the sky, right? So subsequently, this was known as the Sputnik moment. So President Johnson decided on seeing how the Soviet Union had beaten the US up to space. Johnson decided to build something and eventually catch up with Soviet-style industrial policy. Okay? Industrial policy simply means focusing the nation's resources on what the emperor wants to do. Okay? What the emperor wants to do. And this began with Qin Shi Huang. Okay? Qin Shi Huang was a very successful builder of canals, old style. Well, in those days, there were no highways, but ancient highways. And Qin Shi Huang went so far as to successfully systematize all the measurements, for example, the measurements of chariots, okay? Because chariots, they come with all different sizes, okay? But he standardized the width of the chariots. He also standardized the weight, okay? The weight and other systems of measurements. He also built most gorgeous palace known to the world. The 二房宫, yeah, which was the most luxurious building in China at the time. I don't know how you can compare the brand. Is it an opera house or the location which Magdalena is building next to the White House? I don't know how you compare that with the platform built by Xi Jinping. But anyway, so Mao Zedong inherited this, what we later on call Soviet-style industrial policy from Qin Jinping, because Mao Zedong engineered several major projects. Fortunately, most of them not so successful as what Qin Jinping had done. Mao Zedong was intent on believing that he could defy the law of historical development laid down by Karl Marx. Okay? Because Karl Marx said very famously in his Capital and other books that looking at the human condition, we made progress from feudalism into early agriculture, early mechanization, early industry before reaching the Industrial Revolution, which took place first of all in Britain in 1815. After which there came mass production and then the full flowering of capitalism. Okay? And because of the many faults and injustices of the capitalist system, particularly exploitation by the owners of the means of production, so they exploited the excess value forcibly given by the laborers to make the capitalists rich. So this was the source of socialism. Socialism means expropriation of the rich owners of the means of production. Okay? And but Mao Zedong believed that despite the fact that China, when the communists took over the country in 1949, China had not gone through a full-fledged capitalist period. So Mao devised a lot of political campaigns, the most notorious of which was the Willy Forward. Okay? Willy Forward from about 1956 to 58, 56 to 58, which led to the 3 years of famine. Okay, the 3 years of famine in which an estimated 40 million Chinese perished. Okay, so returning to Xi Jinping. Well, Xi Jinping has also inherited this obsession with, shall we call, Soviet-style industrial policy. So, in the past decade or so, he has focused China's money and energy on building microchips, okay, on building high-tech industries. So his famous program, China in the year 2025, okay, was a bare statement of his belief that by year 2025, China will have undergone the metamorphosis from a world factory into a world-class innovation hub, okay, by the year 2025. So now 2025 is upon us, and we are now doing the 15th five-year plan, lasting from 2026 to 2030, which will be discussed at the forthcoming fourth plenary session of the Central, to be held on October 20th to 24th. Okay. So this is just one aspect of according to my analysis of the Chinese DNA, current leaders, Xi Jinping and his comrades, following the ethos and instructions of Mao Zedong and Qin okay, and then Qin. So I think I'll stop here and we will follow up with the discussion session. Right.
Thank you very much for all that. And I was going to say with sort of your final concluding thought there, that led me into well, one of the questions I had, one of the points that I thought was interesting looking through the book, which you discussed earlier on, is sort of the argument you make of the influence of legalism as a philosophy, as a political philosophy in Chinese history. I think, I think just about anyone who looks at China-related issues, Chinese history, would be very familiar with the ideas of Kongzi or Confucianism, or sort of state Confucianism. Not as many people would be familiar with legalism, or the ideas of Han Fei, which, if you study them, can be like really shocking, actually. Right, sort of. He makes Niccolo Machiavelli look like a real softie, and what he recommends in terms of statecraft. But and I think it's particularly arguing, which you mentioned a few times in the book, the idea of the sort of the idea that the Chinese system, the Chinese state, or the imperial Chinese system, was sort of Confucianist on the outside, but really more legalist on the inside, in the way that the imperial state looked at the way that officials should be cultivated, the way that rewards and punishments should be laid out. And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about that idea that you have in the book, that and sort of in which you do draw this line from competing political philosophies in ancient China, and sort of the emergence of legalism under the reign of the first emperor Qin Shi Huangdi, and its connection, and what you argue is its continuing connection to the present. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. Well, as we know, the Warring States period, okay, which preceded Qin Shi Huang. So those of us who have a basic understanding of Chinese history understands that initially there were 7 kingdoms, okay, in the really old historical times, 3-4 centuries before Christ, when Confucius was born, and so was Siddhartha, the originator of Buddhism. Okay? So at the time of Confucius, there were 7 empires vying for supremacy. Okay? And Confucius, because it was a time, I call this in my book the first flowering of free thought and free debate in Chinese history, because precisely because there were no unified authority in the land. Okay? The authority was split among 7 kingdoms. So Confucius was free to go from empire to empire, preaching his ethos, his governance mechanism, his philosophy of governance, and so forth. Okay, so Confucius, the main ethos of Confucius can be summarized very clearly, and this is a kind of a static philosophy to ensure the power of ensure the reign of the powers that be. Okay? So the major point of Confucianism is that everybody must be satisfied with his station in life. Okay, so in the family, the children and the wives obey the husband. Okay, husband obeys the junior officers. The junior officers obey without ever challenging the senior officials, and the senior officials obey again without challenge, obey the edicts of the emperor. Okay, and Confucius or his later disciples also devised a imperial examination system. In Chinese is the okay, the imperial examination system, whereby the emperor and his ministers picked the bright young people who excel themselves in the imperial examination and who subsequently were appointed ministers. Okay, so it was a shall we say a static model of government, but which ensure long reign and perennial stability. 长期主义 long reign and perennial stability for the Confucius definitely did not encourage rebellions, or even if the emperor is an evil guy, he doesn't encourage rebellions and so on. The legalists actually went one step further. Okay, the legalists went one step further because they have devised even stricter mechanisms to protect the invincibility of the emperor. Okay, so the most famous legacy of the legalists is the so-called common guild system. Okay? The system of common guild. In Chinese, it is the eventual. Okay, the eventual system. Lian, that means coordinated. Coordinated. Zhuang, that means you sit in fist. Okay, so in the early urban cities, everybody was divided in groups of 10 families. Okay, groups of 10 families, and the families were encouraged to report on each other, mainly because of the fact that if family A out of 10 families, if a miscreant, okay, if a particularly evil young man in that A family committed murder, and all other members of the 9 other families would face the same punishment. Okay, so if because of the crimes committed by this bad boy resulted in a life imprisonment, then all members of the 9 other families also receive life sentence. Okay, so this is called the system of common guilt. The system of common guilt, and this is an even more efficient and even though of course it's crude, but it is very efficient way of preserving imperial power. Okay, imperial power, and to this day, the Communist Party, okay, the Communist Party still uses this system because in Chinese cities, they have revived the Deng Xiaoping actually abolished much of this harsh system, but Xi Jinping in the past 10 years have revived. So he has revived this neighborhood committee system, okay, neighborhood committee system, which is modeled upon the legalist system of common guilt. So what is happening is that if say, a neighborhood committee looks after 20 families, okay? So these members of the 20 families are encouraged to report on each other, and they are also encouraged to report to the police. To report to the police if they see a stranger appearing in the neighborhood, okay? Somebody who looks like a Uyghur or who looks like a Tibetan, okay? Or if a foreigner appears in the neighborhood. So they are duty bound to report this to the police. And sometimes they get the reward, okay? They get the reward. If in some way they are found out to have defied this responsibility of reporting, and they will again be penalized, okay? They will again be penalized. So, well, I'm sorry for this interjection about Hong Kong, okay? Hong Kong government has set up a huge national security bureau within the Hong Kong police, okay? And this national security bureau within Hong Kong police, from day one, that means after the national security law was passed in June 2020, it was passed by the National People's Congress, that means Chinese parliament, and imposed on Hong Kong without any consultation. Okay? So, under the national security legislation, the National Security Department of Hong Kong Police also set up a reporting system. Okay, the reporting system, and so far, within past 4 years, that means from 2020 to 2024, just within 4 years, the hotline, the hot reporting line set up by the police have received 900,000 calls reporting on seeing potential saboteurs, okay, potential people who might disrupt the national security legislation. So this the eventual system, this common guild system, been passed down not only to the been passed down from the time of the legalists, not only to the CCP but also to Hong Kong. Okay, also to Hong Kong. So Mao Zedong in the early 80s gave a very clear-cut instruction. He said that most people, including foreign commentators or local intellectuals, have theorized that the Chinese system is based on Confucianism. But Mao said, I can tell you that Confucianism is only the skin, it's only the edifice of the system. The inner core, the core philosophy of running the Chinese state is actually different. It's actually different. Ancient monarchs right through the dynasties from the Tang, Song, Qing dynasties and so forth, they have used both the mechanism and the edicts of Confucius and the legalists. The legalists actually form the core of the philosophy to a much bigger extent than Confucius. Confucianism is mostly used to nurture a obedient ruling class through the imperial examination system. An upper class of scholars, after winning the imperial exam, after getting their position as junior ministers and subsequently senior ministers, they will never imagine they will organize a rebellion against the act, because they they were the beneficiaries of the system. Okay, but the ethos, the central ethos of governance, was laid down by the legalists, okay, by the legalists who formulated the first spy system in the world, the first spying system in the world. They also formulated companion systems such as the hukou system. Okay, the hukou system simply means the household registry system. That means I think this is practiced. This has been practiced only in China, not even in the perhaps in the darkest days of the Soviet Empire. And this household registration system pointed out that if you were born in a poor village in Sichuan province, okay, well, Sichuan is it used to be the most populous province in China, the southwestern part of China, but the province is far away from the ocean, so it has traditionally been a poor province. But if you are unlucky enough to be born on the hilly regions of Sichuan, then under this hukou system, this residence permit system, you are obliged all your life to stay in that hilly region, and extremely poor regions in Sichuan. You cannot move to Shanghai or Beijing or any other place close to the coast. Okay, so this system has endured until today, with minor modifications. For example, Chongqing, okay, Chongqing, which has been designated a directly administered cities, one of the four directly administered cities in China. Okay? Well, China is a highly unified country, okay, and through the years after the communists took over, they have only designated three cities with the stature of a province, which is directly administered by the central authorities. Okay, and in the 80s they added Chongqing, so they are now four directly administered. So the modification of the hukou system takes the face, takes the form of the fact that if you were born within Chongqing, Chongqing is now the biggest city with a population of about 25 million. So if you were born in Chongqing, you could move around Chongqing. Okay, you could move from the rural to the industrial and business centers of Chongqing, but you cannot move out of Chongqing. Okay, you cannot move out of Chongqing. Of course, you have heard many stories about one of the success stories of the Deng Xiaoping revolution, and that is Deng Xiaoping allowed rural workers to work in Shanghai and Beijing. Okay. But mind you, these rural workers who agreed, initially they were farmers, okay? They agreed to move to the cities to do the work, to do the dirty jobs, which most Chinese or Peking people would not deign to do, any construction work, cleaning up the streets and so forth, dirty jobs, okay? But these migrant workers, okay, originally were born in villages but who moved to Beijing and Shanghai. They could not qualify to have Shanghai or Beijing hukou or in other words, citizenship, okay, citizenship. And this is reflected by the fact that only people who are born in Shanghai or Beijing or some of these rich cities are entitled to free medical treatment. Their national security, the social welfare payout is much higher than people with rural birth certificates. Okay, so this is one of the major causes of inequality in China.
Well, if I could, like I said, you do present a number of very compelling arguments, particularly with the example of the glucose system and the ways you can trace it back over time. I did want to press you a little bit, or again, maybe ask you to elaborate a bit more on sort of the idea to which the extent of dominant political ideas in China today, again, as are being propagated by the Chinese Communist Party, to the extent to which they do share that lineage. And I will admit, as I was reading through your book, it was causing me to think or reflect a little bit more. I will admit, I myself have usually been in the camp, if there is this debate, well, I mean, for example, I've had the discussion with other people before about a particular policy aspect of the Chinese Communist Party today. And I have said to a few people in the past, well, stop. I would say, the Chinese communists don't necessarily act the way they do because they're Chinese. The Chinese communists act the way they do because they're communists. And I myself have sort of presented the argument that of like a very heavy sort of Soviet influence or Bolshevik influence on the origins and development of the Chinese Communist Party. But again, in the book, you present a series of pretty compelling arguments that we need to look past that, or a little bit earlier than that. But I kind of wanted to press you a little bit on that particular point to share with us your thoughts. What would your response be to that argument? Is the Chinese Communist Party, is it more Soviet or is it more legalist? Or is it some combination of the two, or are the Marxist Soviet influences on kind of just a cover for things that existed before? How would you respond to those arguments or to that critique?
Yeah, thank you. It is a very to the point question. Well, I mentioned two of my favorite scholars, both working at the Hoover Institution in Stanford. One is Professor Willy Wo-Lap Lam, and the other one is Professor Shang Yang. So they both believe that mechanisms of governance, the philosophy of governance in China, that these ethos has benefited from the Soviet experience. That means the Chinese Communist Party has learned a lot from Stalinism, including the Great Purge, Stalinist purge from 1936 to 38, in which Stalin not only murdered 80% of the generals, but he actually dealt very harshly with intellectuals and other cadres in the party, to the extent that if you look at the purge in general, at least 700,000 to 1 million Soviets perished during the purge just within 2 years, 36 to 38. However, I believe that by the late 30s, by the time Stalin initiated this infamous purges, the CCP had already formulated rules of governance thanks to Mao Zedong and Legalist and Qin and Han. So the Soviet influence was additional influence to the eyes of Mao Zedong. That's why Mao was very much opposed to Khrushchev's the Stalinization movement. He broke with Soviet Union mainly because he disagreed that Khrushchev should give his major speech denouncing Stalin, because it was very sympathetic to. But having said that, I think just using the teachings of the legalists and Confucianists, the CCP, okay, Communist China already had the stock in trade. They already had the mechanisms to run China. Okay, so Stalinism served to confirm to Mao Zedong and the other leaders that what they were doing was right. Okay, because it was done on such a large scale in the Soviet Union, and you know that I think it is not an exaggeration to say that had it not been for Soviet aid, perhaps there would not have been the Chinese Communist Party ruling China, because during the first 20 years of Mao Zedong's uprising, after the party was formed in 1921, for 20 years, the party owed a lot of show and other support from the Soviet Union. Okay, so the CCP had a good reason to emulate and follow the instructions of the Soviet leaders. Not to mention the fact that after 1949, the Soviets sent more than 1,000 engineers and experts to help China build up new factories in the three northeastern provinces. Okay, the three northeastern provinces. Even though now, after so many years, the Dongbei region, the northeast region, is a disaster zone because factories laid down by the Soviet engineers become totally obsolete, and they still employ tens of thousands of workers. So how to find jobs for these tens of thousands of workers working in obsolete factories built with help of Soviet experts in the late 50s has become a big question. But I'm digressing. So I can say that even without the influence of Stalin, the CCP, the cause, the ruling mechanism, the ruling philosophy of the communists would not have changed that much, because it is sufficient for them to build a system which magnify the powers, the glories of the number one leader, namely Mao Zedong and now Xi Jinping, which magnify and glorifies the imperative of a system, a top to bottom system. That means, well, by the way, this is the gist of the what I call the industrial policy system. Okay, so all the policies about, for example, developing the super chip. Okay, so some figures for you here. Xi Jinping personally approved in 2014 $19.2 billion US to invest this much money into the so-called super chip fund. Okay, and in 2019 he invested 28 billion US. Similarly in 2024 also 28 billion US, and in 2025 just early this year Xi Jinping put 50 billion US into this big chip fund. Okay, big chip fund, even though they are still very anxious to import NVIDIA chips to China. So you can see that despite this effort at Soviet-style industrial policy, despite having spent, more than 100 billion US, microchip industry in China, they still at least one generation behind NVIDIA, behind AMD, behind Samsung, behind TSMC.
Thank you. I was going to say, in our remaining time, I have a few more questions I could ask, but I did want to open up the floor if some members of the audience had any comment or questions they wanted to make. If so, just raise your hand and just state your name and your question for Willie. Garrett, please go ahead.
My name is Garrett Van der Wees. I teach History of Taiwan at George Mason University. I'm an advisor here. Welcome back here. Really great to see you again.
I've been to Mason.
Yeah.
I gave the lecture there.
Okay. Yeah.
That was at least 20 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I remember you came here in the 1990s already. So, but
Right.
anyway, welcome back.
That was a lecture endowed by one famous Hong Kong doctor, politician.
Okay.
I hope it's still going on at the lecture series.
Yes. I had 2 points. Basically, one, a small correction. You talked about U.S. Industrial policy and the Sputnik movement, and that really generated Johnson to start the space program. But I think it was more Kennedy that really started it with his major speech here in D.C. Of course, Johnson picked up, but it was really Kennedy who gave the impetus for it. So
Right.
then my question relates to you mentioned the weaknesses of Mr. Xi Jinping, medical issues, physical issues, and so on. We know that there are 2 very major meetings come up with Mr. Trump. Will he be strong and energetic enough for those meetings? Because those will be very demanding. We know from the Wall Street Journal that he wants Mr. Trump to oppose independence. So this will be very, very intensive. So aren't there significant risks there for the Chinese side because of this?
Right. There are the risks are minimal because the Chinese propaganda machinery is the best in the world, and they are fast masters in massaging messages. That means, of course, the readouts of the high level talks, the summit between Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi, the readouts from the White House and the readouts from the Chinese the Department of Propaganda, the vastly different. So if during the tete-a-tete, during the summit, something wrong came out, the Chinese could massage it, okay, and present it in such a way as not to detract from the authority and the wisdom of Xi Jinping. The latest information seems to be there was a possibility that at the APEC meeting in Seoul in November, the 2 leaders could meet on the sidelines of the meeting. But this was not what Xi Jinping wanted. He wanted a full-fledged state visit by Trump to Beijing. And Trump had indicated that he would do it perhaps early 2026. So, there were important considerations in Xi Jinping's mind because of the widespread reporting both in the social media in China and in major world media, including New York Times, CNN, BBC, Japanese press, and so forth, that Xi Jinping has his powers largely cut. Okay, so Xi Jinping set a new lease on life since actually since the major meeting on urban world on July 15. That was his new lease on life. He took advantage of the September 3rd military parade, and just 2 days before the military parade on September 1st, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting in Tianjin, just close to Beijing. And then in the interim, he had traveled to Tibet. He had traveled to just a few days ago to Xinjiang to demonstrate that not only does he have full energy, but he's in charge. He's in charge. His visit to Tibet was particularly impressive because Tibet was a place with very thin oxygen level. So the fact that in spite of his dubious health conditions, he could summon he could summon the will and the energy to go to Tibet. That was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. But in all these cases, this was a well-performed, or you can say a good performance to show his enemies that he has the energy, he has the authority to remain in charge, at least beyond the fourth Qing recession on October 20th and 4th, that he would remain number one, even though some people would still insist on saying this is only, he's only the nominal number one, okay, until the end of his third 5-year term in late 2027. Right. So, about industrial policy, it is true that beginning with former President Biden, well, the Americans also embarked on a kind of industrial policy to revive certain long neglected industries in the US, and to because many major industries in the US have left the states to go to cheaper places. Okay, so Biden, what's the name of he named this something Chips Act, right? To
I think actually it was the CHIPS Act, like as an acronym. The CHIPS Act.
Chips Act, which was a kind of industrial policy, except that it is different from it is a market-oriented industrial policy. Except that in China, it was a bureaucratic top-to-bottom industrial policy. And then, of course, the American chief, Mr. Trump, now putting pressure on TSMC, on Samsung, on SoftBank, and so forth to dole out billions of US dollars to build production bases. That's actually, sorry, this is pressing. Regarding the Taiwan situation, one theory which was perhaps a speculation was that what protected Taiwan from whatever form of invasion from the mainland was TSMC. Because TSMC produces about 60-70% of the highest class microchips in the world. But now Trump has been putting pressure on TSMC to build a 50 billion fab in Arizona, and also the US has successfully persuaded TSMC to invest also 20-30 billion US dollars in a joint venture with Japanese tech, AI manufacturers in Kyushu, in southern Box Island. So the theory goes that when most of TSMC, when most important production bases of TSMC move out of Taiwan, then the world doesn't have to worry if the CCP were to overrun, because the best part of Taiwan, the chips, already left. So
Silicon Shield is gone then, right?
the second shoe is gone. Yes.
If I could, we might have time for one more question, perhaps. Is anyone in the audience has a question? Yes, in the back. Please.
I was wondering that you mentioned but your examples most of your examples focus on internal control. So my question is, Xi Jinping himself proposed a new initiative in September. It's a global governance initiative. So my question is, how do you think the legalism, instead of internal control, how will it build a new philosophy or the ancient philosophy towards other countries in the world?
Yes, very true. So how does the global governance initiative sort of connect to that older legacy of Chinese thought? What would Han Fei have to say about the global governance initiative?
Well, I have a section on the ancient view of China's place in the world, from Confucius, from Lao Zi. Who is Confucius' contemporary, and certainly Zhuang Zi, okay, the author of the Art of the War, okay, which is studied by militaries around the world. From those early days onwards, a few hundred years before Christ, they had already in their mind designated China as the middle kingdom. That means they had already come up with something similar to what Xi Jinping has advertised repeatedly. That is, the world is a universe of common destiny. Okay? Common destiny. But there has to be one major country who lays down the rules. Okay, even though it is supposed to be every country being, we all share in a common destiny, but there has to be a final arbiter. A final arbiter. So from the time of the warring states, from the time of Confucius, Lao Zi, and Zhuang Zi onwards, the idea has been implanted that China, being a continent-sized country, would be the final arbiter. Initially, just in the Indo-Pacific region, but eventually in the world. So that's why if you look at Xi Jinping's speech at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization on September 1st, if you read Premier Li Qiang's speech at the UN just a few days ago, China seems to be bidding to return to its middle kingdom status. However, there are big question marks. Okay. So the punchline in Xi Jinping's September 3rd military parade speech was that he said, "I'm confident that China stands on the right side of history." However, if you look at the people in Beijing celebrating the military parade, Xi Jinping, on one side there was Putin. Okay? On the other side was Kim Jong-un. And then the Prime Minister of Nepal and his wife were also there. So you have to ask the question, are these figures, okay? Models of the builders of the right side of history, okay? And by the way, it is very interesting that a few days after September 3rd, the Prime Minister of Nepal and his wife, they returned home only to face a massive revolution. And just within 24 hours, their palaces were vandalized, were burned down. And I think the Prime Minister escaped perhaps to the Soviet Union. And all the senior ministers of the Nepal regime were, the senior parties of the Nepal Communist Party were beaten up on the streets, okay? Beaten up on the streets. So, with this scenario in mind, despite the fact that, I mean, there's this argument saying that mega chiefs' high tariff policy have alienated the world, and the US is in danger of losing its traditional position since 1945 of being the leader of the free world, the leader of the free world. And that this has been spoiled by market policy and the high tariffs policy, as well as perceived friendship with Putin and Xi. Okay, because the banker chief apparently likes to associate himself with authoritarian rulers of more or less his mental components. In spite of all this, this has certainly given Xi Jinping a chance, okay, to appear in important forums, heighten, magnify China's potential contributions. Okay.
I really, thank you for that very much. I need to cut things off. I think we have gone just a bit over on time. I think we'll have to wrap up the conversation there. And I wanted to thank you very much, Dr. Lam, for generously sharing your time with us today. For those of you who would like to hear a bit more from Dr. Lam, particularly, I think with a more detailed focus on modern day events, we will also be very fortunate to have Dr. Lam as a speaker at our annual symposium that will be held tomorrow. Again, if you either wish to register to attend in person or to watch on the live stream, which will be available on our website. But once again, all the details about that are available on our webpage. So once again, if I can ask you to join me in a little applause. Thank you for sharing your insights today, and we will conclude today's event here. Thank you all for attending.
Yeah, I